Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you. So today we're talking about building healthy relationships. Sometimes we want to say, do as the minister says, not as he does. No, I'm not saying that. We're not just talking about primary committed romantic relationships. We're talking about the way we are with people. And so I was looking for a little light something, as I do, a little humor to begin. And I don't know about Elon Musk. I hope he doesn't mess up my Sunday morning jokes, because I really like Twitter for this. Until further notice, please refrain from the following topics of conversation with me: my weight, relationship status, property ownership, age, employment opportunities, the weather, America, sleep, or feelings. The following is a list of alternative safe topics: bread. This was on the phone, the woman wrote, this is on the phone with my mom. Me, what is your secret for 55 years of marriage? Mom, we never hated each other on the same day. I love this one. My wife and I learned to play this fun game during quarantine. It's called, Why Are You Doing That Way? And There Are No Winners. So talking about relationships, I often talk about this as being the graduate school of spirituality, that we can take up these spiritual principles. All of our work in spirituality is to embody divine being. That's really what it's about. Like, we can look at those qualities of God, and then how would a human being embody that? And so when we're talking about love and oneness, which are qualities of the divine, how would we demonstrate and learn and live that into the world? Yeah, it's with you. I do it with you. You do it with me. And it's beautiful and hard. You know, where none of us are perfect. It's just an interesting thing, isn't it? I want to start with one of my favorite readings from the Bible. This is very familiar to many, many of you. 13 verses from the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians. If I speak in tongues or of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and I have a faith that can move mountains, but I do not have love, then I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrongs. When I read this in a wedding, I always read that line twice. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, we prophesy in part, but when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I thought like a child, I reasoned as a child, and when I became a man, I put away the ways of childhood behind me. For now, we only see a reflection in a mirror, but then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Beautiful writing. You know, Paul was not talking about women keep silent in the church all the time. He had moments of like deep mystical awareness. And so I have such a he's like really like Jekyll and Hyde with me sometimes. It's like, and I recognize what Paul was doing in those epistles, those letters. I don't know if he knew they would be recorded as scripture. He was trying to help these groups who were seeking to teach and live the way of Jesus. He was trying to keep them together. So he had a lot of logistics in there. And then he would slip something like this in. This deep awareness that love is what matters most while we are here on earth. Love is the most important thing we can bring. And I know sometimes I don't want to see a show of hands, but I know many of us have experienced unloving moments in spiritual communities, in churches, in synagogues. And it's understandable. We are human. We're imperfect. I saw somebody raise their hand after I told them not to. Not here, though, right? I'm just kidding. It's a paradox. I love when Paul is saying that we're seeing it in part. We can't know the whole thing, but one day I will be fully loved as I am fully loved. He says known. I will fully know as I am fully known. But I think love is the same thing, that one day when I am free of all earthly limitations and all false beliefs, I will know myself to be love. And that's what God knows me as, love. But here, in the old earth school, as some teachers call it, we got some learning to do. I want to share with you just 3 lines of a Mary Oliver poem that I had not read until this week, and it just kind of blew me away. To live, this is the last 3 lines. The poem is called In Blackwater Wood. To live in this world, you must be able to do 3 things. To love what is mortal. To hold it against your bones, knowing that your own life depends on it. And when the time comes to let it go, let it go. That makes no sense. How can you love something that you know is temporary and hold it to your bones as though your own life depended on it, and then when it's time to let it go, you let it go? You see, the Buddhists teach us so clearly that all form is impermanent and not to cling. And Mary is saying, no, we do cling until it's time to let it go. And this is the paradox. This is what makes living in relationships so difficult for us, because we want to do both things at the same time and we can't. In the last year, I have lost 2 really significant relationships that I saw. You know that old thing, people come into our lives for a reason or a season or a lifetime. I knew these were lifetime relationships, and they are gone. And part of me wants to now just be a let it go guy and not be a clinging guy, because it hurts. It hurts bad when we lose. And what Mary Oliver has restored to me this week is this understanding that we do both. We love that mother that's right in front of us, knowing that we're going to lose her. We love this child right in front of us, knowing that that relationship will end in some way through our death or theirs, or we don't know. But to hold the love in this world to our bones as though our life depended upon it, and to still not cling when it's time to let it go. This is a deep teaching. And I wish I could give you the 6-step easy method to make that happen. There is none. There is none. Joseph Campbell said that life here is like the most beautiful grand opera ever conceived, and it hurts. It hurts. Peggy Lee was a good friend of Ernest Holmes. I don't know if Ernest Holmes, who I talk about here, is the founder of Science of Mind, that wrote the book Science of Mind. And you know, the Fillmores were in the good old Middle West. They were raising organic vegetable gardens and feeding people, and Ernest Holmes was in Hollywood. And Peggy Lee, the great jazz singer, was a friend of his. And she came to him and said, Ernest, I've met the love of my life, and you've got to marry us. And he said, okay, Peggy, but this is the last one. To let go when it's time to let go. Daniel Ludinsky's translation of a Hafiz poem. I had this hanging in my house. I think it's so beautiful. Even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, "You owe me." Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole sky. Love is not keeping score, y'all. I know you want to. I know it's natural to keep score. Well, you didn't show up for me last time I asked you to, so I'm not going to show up for you this time. Love never says, "You owe me." And that last part of the Mary Oliver poem, to know when it's time to let go. So for the rest of the message today, I want to bring a little bit more practicality and a little psychological understanding, but I just want you to know as we hold this, this is the deep spiritual work of being a spiritual, eternal, birthless, deathless, changeless being in form. It is really paradoxical and complex and deep and meaningful and difficult and beautiful, all of those things. So if you're feeling all those things in 5 minutes of your relationship, you're doing it right. Congratulations. But we don't want to cling beyond the time of clinging. That's called codependence. And codependence, the way that I was taught when I was doing my own recovery work from my own codependence about it was that when my worth and value is how you're feeling about me. It's how we are in this relationship, how you're responding. That's where I get my sense of identity and belonging. I give too much, and it's not healthy giving. And so what I was taught in recovery early on, see, my first sponsor in AA, she said, "I think you need to go down the room to the hall to the other room, to Al-Anon, where I learned about boundaries." I could do like a series on boundaries, but I'm not good at it. I just know about it. So I'm getting better. I'm getting much better about it. So here's what I want to do to talk about boundaries. There are 3 quotes, and I'm going to read them without commentary from the Peanut Gallery. Prentice Hemphill says this: "Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously." Boundaries are the distance at which I can love me and you simultaneously. Jaya John says, "Your boundary need not be an angry electric fence that shocks those who touch it. It can be a consistent light around you that announces, 'I will be treated sacredly.'" And lastly, there's no attribution for this one. "Walls keep everyone out. Boundaries show people where the door is." I wish we could all be the sun, just shining love forever on everyone with no thought of ever needing a boundary. But as we're navigating these human relationships, we do have to know. We have to teach people how to treat us. I love that last one, that it's not a wall around us, it's just showing people where the door is. I will be treated sacredly. I will be treated with respect. And if I'm not, then you're not allowed. You're not allowed to harm me, to abuse me. I'm reading this beautiful book by Tara Brach, the wonderful Buddhist teacher and therapist. And the book is not about relationships per se, but the wisdom she has on this is wonderful. She says, when someone threatens our own or others' well-being, we need to find effective ways to communicate our concerns, to set boundaries and determine consequences for harmful actions. We may divorce a spouse, ground a child, make rules for speaking with a friend, vote someone out of office, amen, campaign relentlessly for social change. We can dedicate our lives to preventing harm while still keeping our hearts free of aversive blame. And aversive just means to be have an aversion to it. Like, that's the tricky part there. That we can set a boundary without hating them, without blaming them. As my sponsor used to say, "Honey, they're not doing it to you, they're just doing it." Take nothing personally, but take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. And I know that we are in unity. We're that love everybody church, right? That's what we, y'all know the story. Most of you do, that a friend of mine in the community whose in-laws were much more conservative Christians, and and another person from the family was staying with my friend, and they said, well, don't let them take you to that love everybody church. What a terrible thing. I think it's a beautiful aspirational thing for us to hold ourselves. You know, we are a church that has a really wide open front door. No matter where you are in your spiritual path, you are welcome at Unity. Sometimes we have an immature understanding of our openness, and we think we allow anything to happen. We don't. It's not everything goes at Unity. It's not everything goes in your own life. You get to determine what you're okay with in terms of your relationships. This is so important in building healthy relationships of all varieties. Your friendships with your children, with your parents, with your boss, except Unity of Houston staff. No, I'm kidding. You get to set healthy boundaries with me. It helps us all. Mary's smiling. I take that as a good sign. So we get to have these conversations. And this is how we grow. And you've got to talk about it. There's just no other way. Well, so much for me not giving commentary. So I guess if I were to offer my best wisdom around how to build healthy relationships, there's something in the Mary Oliver poem that just speaks of our vulnerability. I think we have to be vulnerable with one another. And I love the way Brene Brown says that vulnerability is the birthplace of creativity and connection. And vulnerability means that we are who we are. This is it. You know, I'm showing up the best I know how. I want to get better, but this is what you get today. To be, because I was such a pleaser, I got my approval and my sense of identity from succeeding. So once I figured out they gave you grades in first grade, I was hooked on this stuff. Literally, like that was like, oh, this is mine. I never got a B until my freshman year in college. And I was so mad because I had signed up for just the basic English 101, but I had tested out of it. I could have taken a higher level. And I went to the teacher, and he convinced me to stay in English 101, and he gave me a B. I was so angry. I've learned to let down that false front. It did not serve me well. I've learned to be human, and you all know, I talk about it. You know, this is who I am. The second thing after vulnerability is boundaries. It's just so important that we learn where I end and somebody else begins. So if any of this is speaking to you, I really encourage you to do further work on this. Get a therapist. Oh my God. I've had 12-step recovery, New Thought teaching, Unity, Science of Mind, and talk therapy. Those are the three magic things, the paths that have delivered this to you today, where it is on the path. Not done, but it's really saved my life and has given me the tools I need to show up better and better and to grow. And then the last thing I want to talk about is forgiveness. And I'll just start with our dear Edwene Gaines, and she says, here's the simple test to see if you have forgiveness work to do. Are you breathing? I read a ton of books. Study is one of my spiritual practices, and I'm reading a beautiful collection of sayings of the Desert Fathers by Thomas Merton called Wisdom of the Desert, and this is one of them. One of the brethren had been insulted by another, and he wanted to take revenge. He came to Abbot Sissois and told him what had taken place, saying, I am going to get even, Father. But the elder besought him to leave the affair in the hands of God. No, said the brother, I will not give up until I made that fellow pay for what he said. Then the elder stood up and began to pray in these terms, O God, thou art no longer necessary to us, and we no longer need thee to take care of us, since, as this brother says, we can and will avenge ourselves. And at this, the brother promised to give up the idea of revenge. This is a story that has come to me through the same Tara Brach book, A True Refuge. And she mentions another book, which is called Offerings at the Wall. How many of you have been to the Vietnam War Memorial in Washington, D.C.? That beautiful, simple black granite that goes on and on with all the names of our dead. So powerful. Completely unforeseen, people began to bring letters and mementos and leave them there at the wall. It was such a, boy, what a beautiful, does anybody remember the artist's name? It's an Asian American woman who was the artist, but so simple, but just made such a container for grief. And one of the things that was left in this book is just photographs and writings about the offerings that were left at the wall. And Tara talks about a letter and a photograph that were there part of this book called Offerings at the Wall. This is the letter. Dear sir, for 22 years I have carried your picture in my wallet. I was only 18 years old that day when we faced one another on that trail in Chu Lai, Vietnam. Why you did not take my life, I'll never know. Forgive me for taking your life. I was reacting just the way I was trained. So many times over the years, I stared at your picture and your daughter. I suspect each time my heart and guts would burn with the pain of guilt. I now have 2 daughters of my own. Did I mention that the picture was of this Vietnamese soldier and his little girl? I probably should have said that. I have 2 daughters of my own now. I perceive you as a brave soldier defending his homeland. Above all else, I can now respect the importance of life that life held for you. I suppose that is why I'm able to be here today. It is time for me to continue this process and to release the pain and the guilt. Forgive me, sir. The man who wrote that letter was a man named Richard Luttrell, and he had carried the pain of that life he took while in service to the army, while serving in a war, doing as he was trained. And Tara Brach would teach this story about forgiveness and the journey of our releasing. And then an interesting thing happened. In 2009, Luttrell's journey had continued. Another veteran had somehow retrieved the photograph and the letter from the authors of the book and gotten it back to Richard. And he knew he had more work to do to fully embody forgiveness. He went to Vietnam and he traced down the little girl who was in that photograph. And through an interpreter, he went to the village where she was there with her brother. And I just want to tell you what he said. I tried to get all the tears out when I told Karen backstage this story, but it just gets me. He was saying to the interpreter, tell her this is the photo I took from her father's wallet that day that I shot and killed him, and I'm returning it. And with his voice breaking, he asked for forgiveness. And the young woman burst into tears and fell into Richard's arms, sobbing. And later, her brother explained that he and his sister believed that their father's spirit would return to them, and now they believed that it lived on in Richard, and that on that day it had returned. The enormity of our harm that we cause in our unawakened state, and we carry it. We carry it. And so what I'm asking us to do today is to find the places where we need to forgive others, but also where do we need forgiveness? And it may not come as dramatically and as perfectly, and you may not have to travel around the world, but I do know this. If your desire is to let it go, the way will be made for you. And lastly, we want to close with this reading. This is from Rachel Naomi Remen, but with Tara's commentary. Gary, can you go ahead and play? I'll just go right into the prayer after this. Rachel writes, my grandfather died when I was 7. I had never lived in a world without him in it before, and it was hard for me. He had looked at me as no one else had, and he called me by a special name, Nashumala, which means little beloved soul. There was no one left to call me this anymore, and I was afraid that without him to see me and tell me tell God who I was that I might disappear. But slowly, over time, I came to understand that in some mysterious way, I had learned to see myself through my grandfather's eyes. And that once blessed, we are blessed forever. Many years later, when in her extreme old age, my mother surprisingly began to light candles and talk to God herself. And I told her about these blessings and what they had meant to me, and she smiled at me sadly. "I have blessed you every day of your life, Rachel," she told me. "I just never had the wisdom to do it out loud." And Tara writes, "Most of us need to be reminded that we are good, that we are lovable, and that we belong. If we knew just how powerfully our thoughts and words and actions affected the hearts of those around us, then we would just reach out and join hands again and again. Our relationships have the potential to be a sacred refuge, a place of healing and awakening. With each person we meet, we can learn to look behind the mask and see the one who longs to love and be loved, and we can remember to say our blessings out loud." Would you join me in prayer? Help us, God. Guide us, show us, reveal in us the path of love and forgiveness. Remove our pain and help us to remove the pain of others. Help us to connect. Help us to reach out beyond our fear of rejection and judgment. Help us to restore love in broken relationships where we can. Help us to heal in broken relationships where we cannot restore. In this moment, let us resolve, let us commit to being more loving, stronger expressions and givers and receivers of your love, God. Show us the way. Help us. Amen and amen. And if no one has told you today that you are worthy of love and that you are loved, I love you. Thank you. Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.